Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to completely reframe how you view the history of North America. We so often put history into these neat little boxes, starting with a few famous names and dates. But honestly, the real truth is far more sprawling, dramatic, and absolutely ancient. We are looking at a literal epic, a story of hardcore survival, unbelievable architectural marvels, colliding worlds, and huge, monumental shifts in human civilization.
So when did America's story actually begin? For a lot of us, our minds immediately jump straight to 1776, right? The Declaration of Independence. Or maybe 1492, when European ships first popped up on the horizon. But what if I told you that to truly understand the rise of this nation, we have to rewind the clock way, way back? Okay, let's dive into this and uncover a timeline that stretches back thousands, and actually millions of years before those famous dates were ever even jotted down.
Part 1. Forging the continent and its geological birth.
We've got to start millions of years ago with the raw geological birth of North America. Picture this: massive tectonic plates violently shifting, towering mountain ranges pushing upward, and these vast inland seas just completely drying out. Then jump forward to the Ice Age. Imagine this entire landscape totally buried under colossal mile-high sheets of ice. It was a frozen, unforgiving world. But as that ice slowly began to lock up the Earth's water, ocean levels dropped, and that revealed an absolutely crucial pathway, the Bering Land Bridge. And this brings us to one of the most suspenseful moments in human history, honestly. Thousands of years ago, the very first humans stepped foot onto this new continent. They crossed that icy bridge and stepped into an entirely unknown, wild, unexplored world.
Part 2. The first complex cultures and early civilizations.
Now, the Clovis culture represents some of the most famous early hunter-gatherers on the continent. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is their distinct stone tools. They crafted these incredibly sharp, fluted stone points. You'll usually hear them called Clovis points. And these let them hunt massive Ice Age megafauna. We're talking mammoths and mastodons here. Their ability to adapt to a rapidly changing, really harsh ancient environment is a total testament to human ingenuity. But the story certainly doesn't stop with just hunting and gathering. Over time, we start to see this incredible leap in societal development, and it's captured perfectly by the achievements of the Adena and Hopewell cultures. They shifted from a purely nomadic hunting lifestyle over to complex agriculture. They literally began taming the wild landscape, growing crops that could sustain much, much larger populations. And with that stability came monumental architecture. They built these massive, intricate earthworks and burial mounds that still boggle the mind today. Plus, they established vast trade networks spanning across the continent, moving materials like copper and shells thousands of miles. All of this was interwoven with deeply rich and really complex religious practices.
Part 3. America's ancient megacities and the rise of civilizations.
Now, if you have never heard of Cahokia, prepare to be amazed. It was the monumental center of the Mississippian Civilization and hands down the absolute largest ancient city in North America. Located near modern-day St. Louis, at its absolute peak, this bustling ancient metropolis was home to tens of thousands of people. That's a huge population for the time. It featured massive, towering earthen pyramids, vibrant public plazas, and sprawling, complex neighborhoods. It was a dense, urban environment that acted as a major hub of politics, religion, and culture long before European contact.
Let's compare this with another incredible society from a completely different environment. On one side, we have the Ancestral Pueblo people. They thrived in the harsh, arid climates of the American Southwest by engineering towering, multi-story cliff dwellings carved directly into the rock. It's like an ancient apartment complex. Then, on the other side, the Mississippian Civilization, home to Cahokia, which utilized lush river valleys for vast agricultural yields and massive mound building. And this brilliantly illustrates how entirely different societies masterfully adapted their daily lives, their architecture, and their technologies to fit their unique, really diverse environments across the continent.
So to quickly summarize this vital era, ancient America was home to thriving, sprawling civilizations with advanced daily life, farming, architecture, and technology way before European contact. We're talking about vibrant societies here, with complex social hierarchies, deep astronomical knowledge, intricate artwork, and vast agricultural systems. Basically, this was absolutely not an empty wilderness. It was a heavily populated, highly developed world all its own.
Part 4. Early explorers and encounters.
Okay, we know that prior to the year 1000, native civilizations were thriving independently across the continent.
But here's a historically fascinating point right in the middle, the early thousands. Centuries before Columbus, the Viking explorer Leif Erikson led voyages across the icy Atlantic, which actually resulted in Norse settlements in North America. We literally have the archaeological evidence to prove it. It was a brief encounter, sure, but it proves the continent was reached by Europeans much, much earlier than is commonly taught. Then, of course, we hit 1492, with Christopher Columbus and the true beginning of sustained, permanent European exploration.
Let's move to and see how this built, because the arrival of these European explorers triggered a totally new era. It acted as the absolute catalyst that would forever alter the North American continent. Really, it was the collision of two completely isolated hemispheres, setting the stage for an incredibly chaotic and transformative period.
Part 5. The Colonial Clash and Competing Empires.
Let's objectively break down this massive influx of competing empires. First, you have the Spanish, establishing deep roots in the southern and western colonies, bringing their own architecture and societal structures. Then, the French, who focused heavily on the northern and central regions, setting up these massive, super lucrative fur trade routes along the rivers. The Dutch, they set up highly profitable coastal commerce centers, most notably what would eventually become New York. And finally, the English began heavily populating the eastern seaboard with permanent, rapidly growing settlements. So suddenly, you have multiple massive global powers all intensely competing for a foothold in this new world.
The realities of this colonial clash were incredibly intense and complex. This era saw a massive influx of those competing European empires we just mentioned, but most importantly, it resulted in profound and quite often devastating struggles between the Native American populations who had lived there for literally millennia and these incoming settlers. There were rapid, violent shifts in territorial control, constantly shifting alliances, and sweeping changes to the environment itself. The result? A forever changed cultural landscape. The ancient world was being forcefully and permanently overlaid with a new, rapidly expanding one.
Part 6. The American Revolution and the Birth of a Nation.
1776. We all know the number. It's totally etched into the global consciousness. But looking at it now, after everything we've just covered, it feels a little different, doesn't it? So, the crucial point is that 1776 isn't the beginning of the story. It is the dramatic climax of colonial tensions, yes, absolutely. But it is also merely the newest chapter resting on top of thousands of years of human triumph, struggle, and civilization on that very same soil.
And this brings our historical epic full circle. The American Revolution marked the birth of the United States, fundamentally transforming an ancient land into a new, independent nation that would go on to change the course of world history forever. But we have to remember, that new nation was built upon a continent that had already been shaped by ice ages, by the brilliant adaptations of the Clovis people, by the monumental megacities of Cahokia, and by the wildly complex colliding forces of global empires.
So what does this all mean? How does knowing America's ancient, deep-time origins actually change our understanding of its founding? Well, when we widen the lens beyond just a few hundred years, we see a much richer, much more complicated, and deeply fascinating story of human resilience and ambition. The rise of America wasn't just some political event in the 18th century, it's an incredible, sweeping epic literally millions of years in the making. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring these ancient histories for yourself.